The year is 1357, and the city of Venice does not sleep. The canals are quiet, yes, but not silent. Every ripple in the black water is a whisper, and every whisper has weight. Behind thick stone walls and under flickering oil lamps, a profession hides in plain sight, the careful art of assassination by poison. You are 15 years old, nameless and recently sold. You don't know your parents. You were traded from an orphanage in the mainland to a shadowy sponsor in Venice, a scholar who promised the brothers you were leaving behind that you'd be apprenticed in medicine. And in a way, that wasn't a lie. You live above a dried goods merchant in the San Polo district. The front shop is lined with saffron, cloves and dried fruit, but in the rear chamber, past the third curtain, beneath a trapdoor, and down a series of candle-lit stairs, your true lessons begin. There are no blades here, no sudden fights, just hours spent crushing dried leaves into dust, distilling bitter oils, and studying the way bile rises in the back of the throat when a substance goes wrong. Your master is an old man with pale eyes, and he speaks rarely. He tells you that poison is never to be flashy. If it is loud, he says, then you've failed. He once made a living by offering quiet endings to loud men. Now he trains you not because he believes you will replace him, but because he is tired of doing it himself. Every week a new sample arrives wrapped in fabric, a wine bottle that must carry no scent, or a tangerine with a waxy underside coated in something darker than honey. You are told never to ask who the poison is for. That part belongs to the client. Your only job is to ensure it works, and to make sure it cannot be traced, and that is where the real trouble begins. Venice in the 1300s is a city of great wealth and greater suspicion. There is no police force, only hired informants and secret scribes. There is no open justice, just quiet consequences. The Republic has spies in every tavern, and mouths that move too much find themselves mysteriously speechless within days. You learn to wear gloves. You learn to clean your nails with vinegar. You learn the difference between hemlock, nightshade, and dried ground apricot seeds. And most importantly, you learn the trick of mixing a compound that kills slowly. Quick deaths are obvious. But a poison that mimics dysentery or tuberculosis? Those are safer, more acceptable. Better for clients who want their problems gone without raising a finger. But there's a problem. Venice is full of illness, and too many clients come back disappointed. He died too soon, one says. She only went mad. She didn't perish, says another. And with each complaint, your master grows tenser. He burns the letters before you can read them, but the smell of wax and frustration thickens the air for hours. Then comes your first field test. You are told to accompany a shipment of oranges to a private kitchen owned by a senator's mistress. The oranges are real, but one of them, just one, has been treated with a faint coating of something you prepared yourself 2 nights prior. You were proud of the batch. It smelled of nothing and looked like sweat. The mistress's kitchen is large, busy, and full of shouting. No one notices you. You wear a tunic 2 sizes too big, your hands trembling in the sleeves. When you place the oranges in the bowl, you leave the poison one at the top. Obvious, too obvious. You leave and wait. 3 days later, your master receives a letter that is not burned. He reads it twice, lips pressed tight. Then he throws it across the room. She fed it to a servant, he says, and now that servant is dead and the senator wants to know why. You don't sleep for 3 days after that. Being a medieval assassin, especially a poisoner, means being blamed for everything. There is no glory, no chance, no legends. You don't even get to see your target. You live in a haze of herbs and guilt, always unsure whether you've done your job too well or not well enough. And then come the real guild rules. You had thought, up until now, that your master was the guild, but the guild is larger, much larger. 3 men arrive one morning, robed in black, faces uncovered. That surprises you. You expected hoods or shadows. Instead, these men wear legal expressions, like notaries or lawyers. They ask you how long. You've been apprenticed. They ask what compounds you've used. They ask how many kills you've successfully completed. You answer quietly. Then they ask the question that changes everything. Are you loyal to the work or to the clients? You pause, because until now you didn't realize those could be different things. The guild doesn't care about clients. The guild serves stability. If a client asks for something foolish, like the death of a senator during a trade negotiation, they refuse, or worse, they accept and then remove the client instead. You are told, "We are not merchants of chaos. We are managers of inconvenience." What does that mean? It means sometimes you're not killing someone to end a life. You're ending a deal or forcing a delay, or weakening a family's legal claim. You are no longer an apprentice. You are a tool. You sleep in a corner now, next to a pile of wax-sealed scrolls you're not allowed to touch. Every few days a guild courier picks them up and leaves money in a small chest. You are not allowed to use that money. Then one day you wake up to a cold room. Your master is gone. His cot is empty. His clothing is still there. His candle still burning, but he is gone. You search the staircase, the shop above, even the canals. Nothing, no sign. In his place, the guild leaves a note. It reads, "He failed the client. Do not do the same." And you wonder, did he fail or was he failed? Your master's cot stays empty for days. You keep glancing at it, expecting him to walk back in with some clever lie or cryptic explanation, something about teaching you, a lesson in vanishing, but no one comes, just the note from the guild. He failed the client, do not do the same. You sleep beside that cot, not out of comfort, but because the smell of dried sage and bitter myrrh that still clings to the sheets makes you feel like he might still be there. You never even knew his real name. The shop above continues to run, though you're not sure who exactly is supplying the dried cloves now. The merchant who owns it says nothing to you. Maybe he knows not to ask questions. Maybe he never even knew what was going on below. Or maybe he's part of it, and you're just another vessel he's been instructed to tolerate. Your instructions arrive differently now. No face-to-face teaching, no whispered guidance, just rolled parchment tied with black string placed at your feet before sunrise. Each scroll begins with a list of ingredients followed by a target profile, age, typical habits, last known meal. It's never signed. You follow them. You have to, because there's no choice in this guild. You either obey or you vanish like your master did. Your second assignment involves ink, not poison in ink, at least not directly. The task is stranger than that. The scroll tells you to prepare a tincture that causes sudden trembling, mild confusion, and short-term memory loss when absorbed through the skin. Not fatal, not even damaging really. Just disorienting. The target is a visiting notary from Naples. He's in Venice to finalize trade records and settle a minor dispute between two merchant families. His hands will touch the parchment, the ink will do the rest. It's enough to make him miss a clause, enough to delay a contract without anyone realizing why. You learn that not every job is about killing. Sometimes the goal is simply to bend reality. Just a little. Just enough. The ink is delivered to a scribe's studio. You watch from a rooftop, breathing through your sleeve, your palms slick with sweat. You feel like a ghost in your own city, half present, half dreaming. When the notary drops his pen midway through the third document and stares blankly at the paper for a full minute, you know the job worked. You report the success by placing a dry marjoram bundle in a jar outside your door. The next day, the bundle is gone, and in its place is a coin. That's how communication works now. Not with words, with symbols, herbs, placement, ritual. Each task has a method, a rhythm. The guild doesn't trust conversation. Spoken words leave room for memory, but memory can't always be controlled. You become efficient, respected, feared, and slowly the assignments change. You're asked to travel, first to Padua, then to Ravenna. Always alone, always under a false name. You begin to understand that the guild's reach is not just in Venice. It stretches across the northern states, into the courts, into the shipping lanes, into abbeys and marketplaces and guest houses where deals are made over stale bread and expensive wine. You learn how to write left-handed, in case anyone tracks your records. You learn how to make a wound look accidental, and how to slip ground foxglove into licorice paste. But the work is never clean. Your third target does not die. He gets sick, very sick. But he lingers, 5 days of groaning and delirium, until finally the town physician opens his stomach with a rusty knife and finds what he calls the devil's work. That town bans honeyed wine for 6 months afterward, blaming the fermentation. You are never mentioned, but the guilt comes anyway because he had children. You heard them crying outside his room. They begged you to help, and all you could do was close the shutters so you wouldn't hear. That night you almost leave. You pack your tunic, your ledger, and a pouch of dried herbs. You head toward the canal with no destination in mind, just away, away from the guild, from the silence, from yourself. But you never make it across the water because she finds you. Her name is Livia. You don't know if that's her real name. You never ask. She arrives wrapped in a dark red cloak, her hair braided tightly around her head like a crown. She sits beside you at the canal's edge and says only one thing: I know the taste of regret. But the work doesn't care how you feel. You ask her who she is. She smiles, but it's not kind. I'm your shadow, she says. They sent me to follow you, to see if you'd run. And now she knows that you almost did. You wait for punishment, but instead she gives you a choice. You can walk back, she says, and continue as you were. Or you can become something better, something cleaner. You can learn how to kill without error. No loose ends, no guilt, just balance. You ask her what the cost is. She doesn't answer. But the next morning you return to the shop, and you never think about escape again. From then on, Livia becomes your second teacher. She teaches you about timing, not just how to strike, but when not to. How to make a death look like heartbreak. How to follow a priest for 12 days without ever making eye contact. How to burn a letter so that it crumbles into perfect ash. No clumps, no clues. She tells you about the 3 silences, a doctrine known only to high-ranking guild members. The silence of the client. Never reveal who paid. The silence of the E. Method? Never reveal how. The silence of the result. Never reveal if it worked. You ask her what happens if someone breaks the silences. She doesn't answer that either. But one day, she doesn't return. Just like your first master. And the next scroll you receive is different. It's sealed with black wax, not red. Inside there is no recipe, no instructions, just a name. Livia. And you realize you've been promoted, or maybe punished. The difference is hard to tell in your world. You sit for 3 days with that scroll, unable to burn it, unable to act. You remember her lessons, her voice, the way she stood without fear even when surrounded by enemies she wouldn't name. And you wonder, are you being tested? Or are you the test? You don't act on the scroll right away. For the first time since entering the guild, you begin to doubt the path you've followed. Not because it is dark, you made peace with that long ago, but because it now demands something personal. The name on that scroll isn't just a target. It's someone who taught you to survive without screaming. Someone who showed you how to walk through a city full of blades and never bleed. You stare at that black seal again and again, hoping it will mean something different if you look hard enough. But it doesn't change. The message is simple. Livia is marked. You are the one meant to finish her. It's not a test of skill. It's a test of obedience. You spend days preparing nothing. Your tools remain untouched. Instead, you walk the city. You trace familiar canals and markets, though now they feel unfamiliar. The shadows seem to move differently. Everyone you pass seems either too loud or too quiet. You've become hyper-aware of sound, the scrape of a boot, the faint snap of a bread crust breaking, the hush of a cloth being folded. Venice is not a peaceful city. It is anxious by design, and you're starting to realize so are you. You try to tell yourself that Livia must have done something to deserve it. Maybe she disobeyed. Maybe she left the wrong note in the wrong hands. Maybe she tried to protect someone she wasn't supposed to. But the scroll didn't say why. The guild never tells you why. It just tells you who. You ask no one for guidance. Because there is no one left to ask. So you go to the library, not for books, but for patterns, records, contracts. You look into the clients who might have named her. She took jobs you never even knew about. Assignments in monasteries, in salt fields, in the inner courts of nobles, whose names are hard to pronounce. You begin to suspect something that's dangerous to even think. Maybe she wasn't killed by the guild. Maybe she left it. And maybe this scroll is about preventing her from saying why. You now carry a decision heavier than any vial. Do you carry out the order, or do you disappear too? You find her 2 weeks later, not in a back alley, not in a cellar, but in a public square, under the awning of a modest wine stall. Her cloak is gone. Her hair is no longer bound in those careful braids. She looks like a woman, not a killer. Just someone trying to blend in without losing herself. She sees you. Of course she does. Livia always saw everything. You sit across from her at the bench, and for a long while, neither of you speaks. You watch the people bustle by. Merchants trading. Silver for wool, beggars reaching with broken hands, a child dragging a sack of wilted parsley through mud. And then she says, "So, they sent you." You nod. No point lying, she doesn't look angry or afraid, just tired. She pours 2 small cups of wine and hands you one. You hesitate and she smirks. "I wouldn't waste a good bottle on irony," she says. "The wine is sour." She's always liked it that way. You ask her why she left. She shrugs. "There's only so many lies you can poison before they begin to drip through your own skin," she says. "You start forgetting who you are, and then you start forgetting who you were supposed to be." She tells you a story about a bishop she spared. He had ordered the death of a peasant girl, one of his own servants, who had learned too much about his land purchases. Livia had been hired to handle it, not the bishop, the girl. But when she reached the village, she saw the girl, 12 years old, illiterate, shaking in a wool dress. Just a body in the way of property. Livia refused. Instead, she warned the bishop quietly, gave him the chance to withdraw. 2 weeks later, both the girl and the bishop were dead. No record, no official cause. The guild didn't forgive hesitation, and that's when Livia knew she couldn't stay. You ask why she didn't tell you, she sighs. Because you weren't ready to choose. And maybe she's right. But now here you are, scroll in your pocket, her life in your hands. The silence stretches long and uneasy. She says one final thing. "If you do it, make it clean." And with that, she stands up and disappears into the crowd. She leaves the wine, the cups, the seat. You don't follow her, not yet. That night you light your workspace again. You sit in front of the old shelves, the rows of jars, the ancient apothecary bowls, and for the first time in your life you prepare 2 tinctures instead of 1. One is deadly, the other is not. You lace both into separate pieces of parchment. You fold one and place it in an envelope, marked with the guild seal. You burn the other. No one will know which you sent, not even you, and that's how you survive. You never learn what happened to Livia. Some say she was seen near Marseille, living under a fisherman's roof. Others say she took the scroll after all and gave herself over to the end. But your orders stopped coming after that. No more scrolls, no more assignments, just silence. And you begin to wonder, did they release you? Or did they simply forget you? Maybe you were never part of the guild after all. Maybe you were just a tool used, discarded, and left to rust in a quiet corner of history. Centuries from now, someone will walk past your old street in San Polo and never know what happened there. The dried goods shop will have changed owners 100 times. The stairs beneath the trapdoor will have collapsed. The scrolls will have turned to dust. No one will remember your name. But somewhere, in some forgotten ledger, there will be an account that didn't balance, a contract that failed, a whisper that didn't echo. And it will be because you chose silence, not the guild's silence, your own. You never wanted to kill anyone, at least not at first. You were a messenger. That's how it began. Fast feet, faster tongue, and an uncanny sense of when to shut up. In Florence, around the year 1423, those were your most valuable skills. Not talent, not trade, just survival. The Medici were gaining power by the day, and the city was choking on its own elegance. Everything was velvet, marble, and violence. You lived near the Ponte Vecchio, too poor to cross it for leisure, too fast to get caught when the street brawls turned into blades. You carried notes, love letters, loan reminders, sometimes simple warnings. You knew the right doors to knock on and the right ones to never look at. But one afternoon, soaked from unexpected rain, you knocked on the wrong door anyway. That's when everything changed. A man in a dark tunic answered. He was holding a blade, not out of hostility, but as if he had just been polishing it. Behind him, a marble floor was stained with red dust, or something darker. You offered him the envelope. He took it, didn't even read it, then looked you over and said, "You're fast." You nodded. "Good," he replied, "you'll need to be." He closed the door. The next day you found 5 florins in your satchel, and a new note. It didn't ask you to deliver anything. It simply listed a name and a time. You almost laughed. You thought it was a joke or a mistake. But the next morning there was another coin pouch, heavier this time, and a short message. You're not delivering messages anymore. You're delivering silence. Florence was a beautiful place to be forgotten. It held too many statues, too many paintings, too many lives happening all at once. A man could fall in an alleyway and be mistaken for someone who drank too much. A woman could disappear on the way to church and be mourned by the wrong family. And in those shadows between the arches and the candlelit corners, you learned to work. You started small. Sabotage, interference. Snatch a courier's message and replace it with another. Jam a lock, spill oil on a step. All the things that don't look like murder until someone slips or shows up unprepared, or dies because a warning never arrived. You were never told who your targets were. You were just told what to do. You received assignments through chalk marks on a garden wall, a half moon for delivery, a full circle for sabotage, a broken triangle for death. You knew what that last one meant. You ignored it at first, until someone knocked on your door and handed you a pair of gloves and a knife. The first time you killed someone, it was raining again. Florence always seemed to do that. Weep right before things went wrong. Your target was a moneylender, a cautious man, predictable in his routines. He walked alone, but not without watching. You had been told to wait until he reached the outer bridge, where the lanterns burned lower and the river's sound swallowed footsteps. You hid in an alcove, not because you wanted to, but because that's what the note said. You were told to stab once, between the ribs, not the heart, not the throat. Between the ribs, quiet, clean. You did as told. He looked at you with surprise, not pain, as if he hadn't expected you, as if he might have known someone was coming, but assumed it would be someone else. That look stayed with you longer than the act itself. You dropped the knife in the Arno and walked home in clothes that weren't yours. The next morning your payment was doubled, and so was the silence inside you. Florentine politics were not gentle. Lords and merchants dressed like angels and argued like devils. Every guild had its secrets, every alley had its informants. And every day it became harder to tell if you were working for the powerful or just being used by them. Your jobs became more complicated. Now you were asked to delay a death, or to stage it as illness, or to frame someone else entirely. You learned how to mix powdered resin into cheese to cause swelling, how to hide fishhooks in bread crusts, how to make a garrote from lace and piano wire. You weren't an assassin in the romantic sense. You weren't noble. You didn't duel. You just removed things. People, obstacles. Loyalty was a myth in your line of work. You once protected a spice merchant for 6 months, following him at night, removing threats before they arrived. And then, one day, your orders changed. You were told to kill him. No explanation. You did it not out of hatred, not even duty, just the rhythm of the thing. Orders come, you obey. The city goes on. But something inside you cracked. That evening you wandered the marketplace for hours. You couldn't buy anything. You didn't speak. You just walked in circles, thinking about how that man had once given you dried dates on a feast day and told you, "You look tired, boy, sleep is important," and now he was dead, because someone paid more than the last person did, and you had delivered the silence. Your mistakes began after that, not large ones, but small, subtle things. You forgot to wipe the handle of a blade. You left footprints in a cellar. You stayed too long near the scene of a job, watching, thinking, breathing. One evening you took off your gloves before you were home. That's when you noticed it. A white feather, tucked inside your tunic. You hadn't put it there, and only one person ever used white feathers, the cleaners. They didn't remove bodies, they removed mistakes. And now, you were one. You didn't eat that night, you barely slept. You went back to the garden wall, the chalk mark was there, a broken triangle, but it wasn't for someone else this time. It was for you. And you wonder, would you rather die for a crime you committed, or one you haven't made yet? You stare at the chalk mark longer than you should. The broken triangle glows faintly in the early morning mist, like a warning drawn in bone. This was how you marked others. Now it's how someone has marked you. There's a strange chill in realizing your life has been reduced to a symbol, not even a name, just geometry. You scrape it off the wall, not to hide it. Just because you can't stand to look at it anymore. You don't go home. Home doesn't exist when you're a marked man. You slip through Florence like smoke, blending, with the laundry boys, the fish vendors, the midwives who mutter prayers while tossing salt. You know the quiet corners, the warm kitchens that don't ask questions. You sleep in a wine cellar behind a stack of crates and use the bottles to muffle your breathing. The cleaners never miss. You've seen what they leave behind. Rope burns too narrow to have been made by hands, necks tilted too gently, homes too clean for anyone to believe a life ended there. You once saw them take a man in broad daylight, not with weapons, with a smile, a quiet whisper, and a gentle hand on the shoulder. He nodded. He followed. He never came back, and now it's your turn unless you change the ending. Your plan begins with a ledger, not one of your own. You never wrote anything down, but the guild did. Florence runs on records, it always has. Debts, favors, guild, approvals, legal notices. Everything is inked and preserved like relics. Somewhere in that paper empire is a note about you, about what you did, or what they think you did. You slip into the office of public registry, posing as a clerk's assistant. It's not hard. You wear neutral brown, keep your head down. Carry a stack of empty folios to look busy. You find your file in a locked drawer behind a wall panel marked Contratti Speciali, Special Contracts, red seal. You snap it open with a hairpin. Inside are 3 folded sheets, all in different handwriting, all about you. The first is a list of your successful missions. It reads like a menu of the forgotten: Merchant San Lorenzo, Goldsmith Via delle Terme, Maid Palazzo Corsi. No dates, just deaths. The second is shorter. A warning: operative has failed to maintain distance. Behavior emotional, attachment suspected, delay in last execution, surveillance advised. You feel your mouth go dry. You know exactly who they're talking about. The spice merchant. You hesitated. They noticed. The third paper isn't even complete. Just a half-written draft with a blank left for a signature. It reads, authorized, termination by internal dispatch. Schedule, discretionary. Discretionary. That means they can end you any time. You fold the papers carefully, not to keep, to put back. You need them to think nothing was touched. But you leave one thing inside the drawer, a feather, not white, black. Just to let them know. You're aware now, and you're done hiding. You remember an old contact in Santo Spirito, a man with a bent nose and a talent for listening. He sold gossip like garlic, cheap in small amounts but overwhelming when raw. You find him by the back steps of a monastery kitchen where he's weighing turnips and telling a novice about a bishop's mistress. He greets you like a ghost. You're supposed to be dead. You smile. Not yet. He doesn't ask questions. Just gestures to the cellar. Inside, you trade him 3 secrets for 1. Your secrets, the spice merchant was warned. The cleaner's schedule is discretionary, and there's a black feather in the registry office now. His secret, you weren't the only one marked this week. 3 others. 1 strangled in a wine barrel, 1 burned in a bakery fire no one investigated, and 1 still alive in hiding, a tailor. Used to be a runner for the guild before he stitched blades into lining. You ask where he is. The man gives you an address on the edge of the city, near the Leather Dyer's Row. You go there that night. What you find is not a man in hiding. You find a body. Still warm. Whoever killed him was just here. On the wall beside the door is a new chalk mark. Not a triangle, not a circle, but a square with no center, a box. You don't know what it means. But it wasn't meant for the tailor. It was meant for you. The next night, someone knocks on your door. Not the door you're using now, the old one. The place you stopped going to since the mark appeared. They knock 3 times. Pause. Then once more. That's a signal you recognize. It was used for urgent jobs. Unplanned. Dangerous. You decide to answer. But not through the front. You circle around the rear, using the cistern cover to slip under the tiles and rise through the crawl space. You look through a gap in the shutters. It's a child, no more than 10, dirty-faced, holding a letter. You open the door. He says nothing, just hands you the parchment and runs. You unseal it. No symbol, no wax, just 2 lines. You were right to wait. They don't know everything. Meet me at the old chapel by dawn. It's not signed, but you know the handwriting. You arrive before sunrise. The old chapel is broken in half. Its roof collapsed long ago. Morning light creeps through the beams, casting long shadows like prison bars. You stand in the choir loft, your breath fogging in the still air. And then she steps from the doorway. You hadn't seen her in years, not since the job in Siena that ended with 2 wrong deaths and a priest who forgot who paid him. Her name was Luca. She worked blades into her sleeves and lies into her voice. She walks slowly now, older, thinner, but alive and scared. She tells you everything, that the guild is being reshaped, new leadership, less structure, more executions, loyalty purges. Anyone who worked more than 10 contracts is being retired, quietly, efficiently. Anyone who shows pattern, you fit the profile, so does she, and she doesn't want to die either. You ask what she's planning. She looks around and whispers, "A false death for both of us. She's paid a physician to forge a plague record. She's bribed a clerk to ink burial certificates. She has a boat waiting at the riverbend 2 miles out, but it only fits 2. You hesitate. Is this trust, or just another job? And she leans in close and says, "If I wanted you dead, and you'd already be bones in that cellar. You have until nightfall to decide. Do you follow her and vanish, or stay in Florence, take your chances and finish the unfinished?" You walk the city one last time. You look at the statues that never blink, the bridges that never forget footsteps. You breathe the air that still smells like olive smoke and ash, and you wonder, can you ever really disappear in a place that's built from names? Or is the real silence learning to live while no one remembers you? The decision should have been simple. Get on the boat, leave it all behind. Fake your death, melt into some far-off countryside, and never again see the Ponte Vecchio. No more garden wall codes, no more chalk marks, no more names spoken in silence. Just trees, soil, and the sound of chickens arguing in the morning. But Florence isn't a city that lets you leave cleanly, not when your name is written on too many forgotten slips of paper. Not when your face is known to too many men who know how to whistle without moving their lips, and not when you've made too few mistakes, because that too draws attention. So when dusk settles in and the riverboat waits in the reeds, you're still not sure what you're going to do. Luca arrives wearing a baker's apron and a coin pouch sewn into her hem. She hands you a mask. "For the record," she says, "we're plague dead now. Let's not be seen wandering about healthy." The priest she bribed has already filled out the paperwork. You saw it yourself. 2 corpses, unnamed, unclaimed, burned near the edge of Santo Spirito. A fake pyre is ready. All that remains is your absence. She climbs into the boat first. She doesn't look back. You do. Just once. At the skyline. The dome of Santa Maria del Fiore still catching the last orange light. The street still humming under the hush of things not spoken aloud. And something inside you whispers, if you leave now, you'll never come back. And no one will ask why. You. Step into the boat, not for freedom, but because the city has stopped calling your name. Life after Florence is slow. That's the first thing you notice. No bells, no urgency, just birds you don't recognize and roads that turn into trees before they turn into markets. You settle in a border town that doesn't ask where you came from. You tell people you're a clerk. You even take in simple work, transcribing, court records, translating invoices. You live in a rented room above a granary. The grain dust makes your skin itch, but no one tries to kill you. That's new. Luca doesn't stay. She vanishes 4 towns later. No farewell, just a note on the sill. You're good at silence. Stay that way. You do, for years. But silence has a sound, too, a weight. You carry it with you every day. The weight of names, of faces, of chalk. You begin to write, not letters, not confessions, just details. You record the jobs, the people you followed, the ones you lost, the ones who didn't deserve it, the ones who almost escaped. You write in the margins. You draw the symbols you once saw scratched into stone walls. You even draw your own symbol, a circle cut in half, a life split between what you were and what you are. No one reads it. That's not the point. It's just the only way to remember that any of it happened. One night, 10 years later, you hear a voice at the market. A boy is shouting for onions, the way boys always do, loudly, like they're auditioning for something they don't understand. But behind his voice is another one, calm, older, familiar. You freeze, you turn, and you see a face from the garden wall. He's aged, but not enough. He's the one who used to deliver. Your chalk marks. You never knew his name, still don't. He looks at you for half a second too long and walks away, doesn't run, doesn't shout, just disappears into the crowd. But now you know they know you're alive. You expect a letter, you expect a mark, but nothing comes. Not that week, not that year. You think about going back, just once, just to see. You imagine walking the streets at night, unnoticed, a ghost on the bridge. You imagine placing a mark on the wall, not to kill, but just to say, I remember, but you never go. Because Florence isn't yours anymore. It never was. And the guild? It doesn't kill out of hatred. It kills out of routine. And when routines break, it forgets you were forgotten. And in some twisted way, that's mercy. You live quietly now, not in fear, but in peace you don't trust. You grow herbs on the windowsill, not for poison, just for soup. You still sleep with a knife nearby, but you haven't had to use it. You still watch shadows before entering a room. But no one ever follows. You're not dead, but history will say you are. No records, no signature, no grave. Just a name whispered once in a chapel at dawn and forgotten. But sometimes when the wind hits just right, you hear a whisper you can't quite place, a voice from the market, a laugh in a hallway, a footstep that stops just behind you. You turn, nothing, just your shadow, longer than it should be. And you wonder if the guild ever truly forgets, or if silence is just the longest kind of sentence. You weren't always a killer. Once you were. A boy with blistered feet and a head full of scripture. The abbey at Subiaco was quiet, too quiet for most, the kind of quiet that echoed even in your sleep. You arrived at its gates after 3 days of walking barefoot across gravel and bone dry, road with nothing but a bread heel in your sleeve and a lie on your tongue. You told them your parents had died of plague. That much was true. You didn't tell them that your father had choked on his own fear, and your mother had wept so long the neighbors thought she'd gone blind. The monks took you in anyway, not because they pitied you, but because they needed hands and silence. That was the rule. The silence of the Benedictines wasn't a metaphor. It was doctrine. Talking was for prayers, for confession, for duty. Anything else was a risk to the mind, to the soul, to the fragile web of obedience that held the abbey together like old mortar. You were 12 when you first saw a man die. It wasn't dramatic. Just a fall from the upper library balcony. No scream, just a thud, dull, sudden, final. You helped clean the blood. They never told you his name. That was the first time you realized something. If a man dies quietly, the world doesn't always notice. You carried that lesson forward. And 10 years later, when they came to the abbey looking for a monk who could handle delicate matters, you didn't raise your voice. You just bowed and followed. The year was 1411. Italy was still a patchwork of ambition, fear, and coin. The Papal States had claws. Florence had knives. Venice had masks. And the church had everything else. Your first mission wasn't called an assassination. It was called a correction. A prior in a nearby town had begun preaching unauthorized sermons. He spoke of dreams, of visions, of letters from angels warning of decay in the church's foundations. He wasn't accused of heresy. But whispers reached Rome, and Rome reached for you. You weren't told what to do, only what not to leave behind. No scandal, no spectacle, just silence. You traveled under the name Brother Matteo. No weapons, just a worn robe, a sealed letter, and a vial that smelled faintly of pine. You met the prior during evening prayers. His voice was strong, too strong. His words carried conviction. You admired him almost, but admiration was not part of your instructions. You asked to share a meal. He poured the wine. You replaced your own cup with one from your sleeve. He drank deeply, joyfully unaware. By morning he was ill, by nightfall dead. They buried him before sunrise. Pneuma, they said. Bad air. You walked away, quieter than you'd ever been. The church never said, thank you. It said nothing, just sent another letter and another. You became something between a shadow and a servant. Not officially part of the clergy. Not quite a spy. Not quite a killer. Just useful. You didn't carry a sword. You didn't wear armor. Your tools were ink, herbs, and scripture. A pinch of belladonna in a sacramental wafer. A whisper in the ear of a confessing noble. A letter with just enough truth to sound divine. You moved from abbey to abbey, never staying long, never using the same name twice. The monks who met you assumed you were on pilgrimage, and in a way you were, a pilgrimage through the cracks in faith. You saw bishops who stole wheat from orphans, priors who bedded peasants and paid scribes to burn the records. You saw inquisitors who cried after each judgment, then dried their eyes with gold. And every time you were told, deliver them, you asked no questions, because the church didn't make mistakes. And if it did, those mistakes were your duty. But even monks break. It happened in Cremona. The target was a nun, Sister Beatrice. She had written a book, not a dangerous book, not even a published one. Just pages and pages of questions. Why must the angels always be male? Why does silence make women holy, but make men powerful? Why are we told suffering is sacred when no one listens to it? Her writing wasn't heresy, not yet, but it was loud, too loud. Your letter didn't say why she had to die. It just said, correct the voice. You tried. You approached her during a garden walk. She smiled at you, kind, sun-warm, curious. You asked about the roses. She told you they only bloomed if no one looked at them. You couldn't do it. You left without planting anything in her tea. 2 days later, she was found dead anyway. Drowned in a shallow pool. The local bishop called it a divine accident. You were transferred the next morning, no comment. You never forgot that. It meant the church had others, maybe better than you, or maybe worse. You started to notice signs, letters that arrived too quickly, deaths that happened before you reached the door, assignments where your name was never confirmed, and then one day a parchment with no name at all, just a symbol. An empty cross, not crucified, just waiting. You had to ask yourself, were you being sent to kill or to be killed? You hesitated, for the first time in years. You stayed in the abbey past your allowed days. You refused your next letter. You stopped responding to the courier who waited near the market square. And nothing happened for a while. Until one night, your chamber candle was gone. replaced by a single strip of black cloth, a sign of mourning. You hadn't lost anyone, but someone had marked you for grief, and you realize maybe silence wasn't safety anymore, maybe silence was a target. You wake up, with the black cloth still resting on your chest. You don't move at first, just stare at it, thinking about how many times you've helped deliver grief like this, quietly through absences and ashes, without ever saying the name aloud. Now it's been handed back to you, a loop closed, a silent accusation folded into fabric. You tuck it into your sleeve and rise for morning prayer. You chant the Psalms. You kneel with the others. You bow at all the right times. And yet something has shifted. The silence feels different now, less like a sacred vow, more like a closing wall. They're testing you. You know it. The cloth wasn't just a message. It was bait. The church doesn't confront its failures. It waits for them to confront themselves. You spend the next 3 days pretending you're still obedient, still useful. You clean the chapel steps. You copy old gospels. You nod when spoken to. But every night you slip into the archive. The abbey's records are kept in a locked room below the cloisters, musty and unkempt. Mice skitter between scrolls. Candles burn unevenly. But the ledgers are intact, and it's in one of these, buried between accounts of wool shipments and alms to the poor, that you find the name again. Beatrice of Cremona, not listed as deceased, not listed at all. She's been removed, erased, as if she never lived. You turn the page and find another name, one you vaguely remember from an assignment 5 years ago. A merchant turned deacon who questioned indulgences. He too was supposed to be dead, but the record shows something stranger. Transferred, no location, no follow-up, just that one word. Like a body that's being quietly reburied under a different name. And now you understand, not everyone dies. Some are taken, rewritten, buried in cloisters too far from Rome to be found. It's not just correction, it's concealment. That night, someone slips a note under your door. No wax, no signature, just 5 words. Brother, Matteo sees too much. You don't remember telling anyone that name. It was the one you used for your very first mission, the one that belonged to a boy who didn't yet know what death felt like through cloth gloves. You spend the rest of the night sitting upright in bed, staring at the door, waiting for it to open. It never does. You leave the abbey at dawn, not because you've been dismissed, but because you're done pretending. You wear a pilgrim's robe, wide-brimmed hood, sandals, no seal. You carry no food, just water, and a scrap of parchment with 2 words on it, Cella Rosa. You don't know what it is, but it was scribbled in the margin of Beatrice's erased record, too faint for most to see. It takes you 4 days to reach the hills near Viterbo. There's a ruined church there, half swallowed by vines, roof half collapsed. Locals won't go near it. Too quiet, they say, but you go inside, and in the dust and debris, you find something strange. A small library. Not chained, not hidden, just quiet. Scrolls, pages, names, all the forgotten ones. Men and women whose records vanished from abbey archives. Scribes, monks, nuns, deacons, a few laymen, and all of them listed here. Not as dead, not as guilty, but as preserved. Voices. The church couldn't kill outright, so it buried them in history. And then you find her Beatrice, alive, older now, thinner, but alive. She watches you with calm eyes and no surprise. I wondered when they'd send you, she says. You open your mouth to speak, but you've forgotten how. You sit, and she tells you everything. Cella Rosa is a monastery of silence, not one designed for worship, but for containment. It holds voices too dangerous for the church to destroy, voices it once considered useful, even holy, until they began to question too deeply. Men who corrected bishops in private, women who spoke too eloquently about justice, monks who saw visions the Vatican couldn't explain. They're not dead, but they've been displaced, quietly, carefully. No records, no visitors, no letters, just scripture, meals, and silence, not by choice. But by design. Beatrice tells you she's been here for nearly a decade, that she still writes in secret, still hopes. You ask why they didn't kill her. She shrugs. Because silence is easier than martyrdom. They fear saints more than corpses. You stay for 3 days, not as a prisoner, not as a guest, as a man unsure what he is anymore. You read the scrolls. You listen to the soft clink of bowls in the dining hall. You pray with the others, but not to be saved, only to be quiet. It almost feels like peace, almost. But on the 4th day you find a feather tucked under your bowl, not white, not black. Red. You know what that means. It's not from the church, it's from someone else, a faction within the silence, not. All who live at Cella Rosa are content. Some want their voices back. And they've seen what you've done, you ask Beatrice. She only nods. They think you can deliver us. You shake your head. I was never a savior. No, she replies, but you were very good at delivering silence. You stand at the gates of Cella Rosa and look back, a monastery buried in forgotten names, a place where the erased keep breathing. And you wonder, do you stay and vanish in peace, or leave and become the voice they tried to erase? You leave the gates of Cella Rosa just before dawn, not because it feels right, but because staying would mean accepting that silence is your only legacy. You've worn robes most of your life, but you've never really been a monk, not in spirit, not in purpose. You were trained in obedience, not faith. You were fed with ritual and hollow ceremony, then turned loose with the weight of death on your shoulders. But now you carry something else, a name. Beatrice's, and all the others. Names that don't exist anymore, except here, inside your memory, inside those tattered scrolls in that hidden cloister. If you die now, they vanish with you. If you live and disappear, they vanish anyway. You make your way south toward Rome, not to return, but to confront. You travel slowly, in disguise. A beggar one day, a mason's helper the next. You speak to no one unless you must. But you listen. Whispers of rebellion, of cardinals bribing tradesmen for loyalty, of a young monk who spoke too passionately during Lent and now can't be found. Different place. Same pattern. The church doesn't need to excommunicate anymore. It just makes people vanish. It takes you 14 days to reach the outskirts of the city. Rome is busy, noisy, bright. It blinds you after weeks in stone cloisters. But it's not. The same city you left behind years ago. The faces have changed. The bishops too. Even the guards at the gates seem younger. You slip into the city like you always did, unseen. You stay in the shadows of the Trastevere district, a neighborhood too busy to care who's praying and who's watching. You find an old friend, once a confessor, now running an apothecary out of an abandoned laundry. He doesn't recognize you until you say the words. Brother Matteo sees too much. Then his face hardens. You're supposed to be dead. I was, you say. I'm not anymore. He doesn't ask questions, just hands you bread, water, and ink. You begin writing again. Not for yourself this time, but for them. You write down every name from Cella Rosa, every assignment you ever carried out, every monk who vanished, every bishop who gave a quiet order without ever signing a page. You write until your fingers blister. You sleep on the floor, head resting on open parchment. You pray not for salvation, but for clarity. And then finally, you copy the entire thing. 5 times you seal them, not with wax but with prayer beads, one from each assignment you completed. They're meaningless to most, but to the right people they're a signature. You send one to Florence, one to Venice, one to Naples, one to Avignon, and one to the Pope's own scribes. You expect death. Instead, you receive silence. Nothing arrives. No response, no retribution, no shadow at your door. You wait 6 days. On the 7th, the apothecary's window is broken. You find a feather on the sill, but it's not red, not black, not white. It's grey, and beneath it, a single line of text. Let this be enough. You leave that night. Not because you're running, because there's no more water wage. They won't kill you now, but they won't let you come closer either. You return north, not to the Abbey, not to Cella Rosa. You go further, up into the hills where the roads turn to stone and then to nothing. You find a ruined chapel no one's used in 50 years. The bell is gone, the altar is cracked, but it's quiet, and silence for once feels earned. You plant rosemary outside the door, you rebuild the hearth, and you begin again. Not as Brother Matteo, not as a killer, just a man. Years pass. The scrolls you sent begin to circulate in whispers. You hear of a nun in Bologna reading from a forbidden parchment during Vespers, of a scholar in Milan referencing the lost abbey of erased names, of a priest in Lucca asking aloud, "What happened to Beatrice?" You smile once when you hear it, not because they know you, but because they remember her. That's all you ever wanted. Not forgiveness, just memory. You die in winter, old, quiet, alone. There's no record of your death, no stone, no name. But someone, perhaps a monk who once saw too much himself, writes a small note in a ledger years later. The voice that was almost lost spoke once, then vanished. Let that be enough. You weren't supposed to be there, not in the marble halls, not under chandeliers made of Venetian glass, not wearing a tunic with buttons instead of rope. You were born in the mud just outside Siena, son of a pig herder who couldn't read, and a mother who washed blood off butchers' walls for pennies. Your childhood smelled like sour wine and wet ash. Your education was survival, and yet here you are, 22 years old, standing behind a duke with a knife in your sleeve and a smile carved into your face. Not by choice, by instruction, because someone powerful gave you a suit, a new name, and a very clear job. Make the duke disappear, but not today, and not with a blade. That would be too obvious. You arrived at the Palazzo Albizzi 3 weeks ago as Giovanni della Cava, a distant cousin from the countryside with a rare sense of discretion. No one questioned you. The court was already full of half-relations and invented names. Nobility was porous, so long as you wore the right fabric and bowed at the right time. You played the part well, not too eager, not too quiet. You knew the names of wines. You knew how to dance without looking stiff. You knew when to speak and when to nod like an idiot, while the real nobles circled each other with compliments sharpened into threats. You were nothing special, which made you perfect. The Duke was not a fool, that was the problem. He was cautious. He didn't drink unless his cupbearer drank first. He didn't eat anything not tasted by his hound. He wore gloves at dinner. He slept in a room with 3 locks and a servant who changed shifts every 6 hours. He was also kind. That made it worse, because cruelty would have made this easier. Instead, he was polite. Asked you how the countryside was. Gave you a coin for remembering his sister's name. Offered you a book once, something about astronomy. You pretended to read it. In truth, you were learning the palace, the blind spots, the rhythms, the things that weren't written down. You noticed how the guards changed posts at the same time every dusk. You saw how the Duke's steward counted the silver cutlery, but never the serving bowls. You watched the court physician's apprentice stash vials under the chapel stairs, and every night you returned to your quarters and etched one more piece of the plan into your mind. The kill was scheduled for the Feast of St. Michael, 7 days away. Large crowd, distraction, noise, smoke, and then a sudden illness. No dagger, just the right compound, the right moment. The Duke would simply collapse during a toast. No scream, no fight, just the kind of death the nobility prefers. Quiet, unexplained, and full of expensive flowers. But something goes wrong. On the third night, someone knocks on your door. Not loud, just 3 polite taps. You open it to find a woman standing there. Dark red, cloak, gloves, veil. She steps inside without waiting. You don't ask who she is, you already know. She's the one who hired you, or, more accurately, the one who passed along the payment. She doesn't sit. She just says, "The job is postponed." You ask why. She doesn't answer. Instead, she gives you a sealed letter waxed in black, not the usual red. You wait until she leaves before opening it. Inside is a single line. A new player enters the court. Do not act. You feel it in your chest immediately. The burn of uncertainty. Not because the job changed, but because you weren't told before arriving. That means someone higher than her is watching. Someone who doesn't trust you. Or maybe someone who's testing you. Again. The next morning, the court welcomes a new guest. He is introduced as Lorenzo de Rimini, an advisor from the papal court. Tall, pale, well-spoken. He watches everyone, but especially the Duke, and especially you. At dinner, he sits 2 places away and asks if you've ever been to Rome. You lie and say no. He nods like he doesn't believe you, but doesn't care. You can tell he's dangerous, not because he's armed, but because he isn't pretending to belong here, which means he does. You begin watching him the way you were trained to watch others. You see him slip coins to servants. You see him whisper into the steward's ear and make him pale. You see the Duke grow quieter in his presence, less open, less kind. Something's shifting. The palace air thickens. Suddenly people are remembering debts they hadn't thought about in years. Women begin to whisper about Rome. The bishop visits more often. And the guards? They've stopped greeting. You're no longer invisible. You're being catalogued, which means you're in the way. The letter comes 2 days later, slipped under your door. Same wax, same script. It says only, forget the poison, use the blade. That's when you know. The plan has failed. The elegance is gone. This isn't about secrets anymore. It's about speed, and you wonder, if you're not meant to succeed, are you just the first distraction? You don't sleep the night after the letter arrives. The shift from poison to blade is more than tactical. It's philosophical. Poison is patience. It's for those who control the room without being noticed. A blade, on the other hand, is a confession. It says, I'm here. It says, I failed to be quiet. And yet here you are, fingers tracing the hilt of a dagger that wasn't supposed to leave your satchel. The Feast of St. Michael is tomorrow, and everything has changed. There will be hundreds in attendance. Torchlight, music, veils, wine, so much noise. The palace walls will feel like they're breathing. And in the middle of it all, the Duke, still kind, still careful, still completely unaware. You spend the day memorizing the space. The banquet hall has a high ceiling and terrible acoustics. That helps. Too much echo, too much distance. Perfect for a clean escape. But the hall also has only 3. Main exits. 2 are guarded by men who now eye you more than they used to. The third, near the servant's side, is unguarded, but only during musical interludes. You time it out. 3 minutes of lute and drum. That's your window, you know the routine. The Duke will make a toast, raise his cup with his right hand, turn to the papal advisor, Lorenzo, and offer him a polite nod. That's when the crowd will be watching them, not you. You won't get another chance, but there's another problem. The woman in the red cloak returns, not in person, in presence. She's seated at the far end of the room between 2 cardinals who haven't spoken to each other in years. She shouldn't be here. She's not part of the court. She doesn't look at you, not once. But that's the point. She's here as a witness, or a handler, to make sure you follow the new order, to ensure it happens now, fast, loud, and unfixable. You begin to suspect something you hadn't dared until now. The goal isn't to kill the Duke. The goal is to cause chaos. You think about leaving, not the room, the job, disappearing into the crowd, stepping through the kitchen and into the stables, changing clothes, riding south, vanishing like so many low-born men before you. But you don't. Not yet, because if you leave now, someone else will do it. Someone louder, someone with no interest in keeping the crowd safe, the servants unbloodied, the legacy intact. And for all the lies you've lived through, you don't want to die with their version of the story being the only one told. The feast begins. You stand near the wall, dressed like any minor noble, silk too stiff, shoes too clean. The hall glows with candlelight. Lorenzo da Rimini stands behind the Duke now, always watching. You think he might suspect you, maybe even wants you to try something, maybe he's ready. That's fine. So are you. The musicians strike their first chord. The Duke rises. He smiles. You reach for your dagger. But before you move, a hand grasps your arm, not hard. Not urgent, just firm. You turn. It's the woman in red. She leans in, breath warm, words quiet. He's not the target anymore. You blink. Then who? Her mouth doesn't move. She simply looks down the table to Lorenzo, and that's when everything breaks. A scream. Not yours, not hers. One of the servants, eyes wide, hands shaking, pointing toward the musician's corner. A body has dropped, but not from a blade, from a cup, a poisoned one, not the Duke's, Lorenzo's. He's twitching. Now, foaming at the mouth, trying to stand, but already too late. His hand reaches out, grasping for something, anything. He looks directly at you, then dies. No confession, no warning, just the end. The hall erupts, not in chaos, in silence. Because this wasn't expected, not by anyone. The woman in red is gone. You don't remember her leaving, just disappearing between breaths. The cardinals look stunned. The Duke stands frozen. And you step back into the curtain's edge and vanish with the servants. No one stops you. They're too busy asking questions. That night you find a letter under your pillow. This time the wax is green. You've never seen that color before. Inside, you passed. No signature, just a pressed violet petal tucked into the fold. You hold it for a long time. Not because it means anything, but because you're starting to realize something. You were never meant to kill anyone. You were meant to be seen, to appear, as a threat, so someone else could act behind the curtain while all eyes were on you. You weren't the dagger. You were the distraction. You wonder now, did the Duke survive because of you? Or in spite of you? And more importantly, who's next? You don't sleep. The palace settles around you like cooling wax. All the noise of the day, the music, the screaming, the muffled commands from armored guards, has dimmed into silence. But your thoughts do not, because everything you knew about the job, the guild, the kill was wrong. You were never meant to murder the Duke. You were never meant to poison a cup. You were never even supposed to succeed. You were a story told aloud so others could work in the shadows. And now the story must end, cleanly, quietly, without you in it. At dawn, you pack your satchel, not because you're fleeing, because your part is over, and you know how these endings go. There's no pension for men like you, no home to return to, no medal of thanks. There is only forgetting, and you've become good at that. You remove the fine tunic and put on your old clothes. Still threadbare, still familiar. You keep the pressed violet petal from the green wax letter. You're not sentimental, but it feels like proof that all this actually happened. You wait by the kitchen gate for the first bread delivery. When the porter walks past, yawning and pulling his cart, you follow. No one stops you. You're not anyone now, just a former shadow, walking in daylight. The city swells with rumor. By midday, everyone knows Lorenzo de Rimini is dead, poisoned, assassinated. Whispered names fly like ash in the wind. The Duke has closed the court for the week. Priests are holding quiet masses for clarity and protection. Guards question every cook, every courier, every servant who so much as dropped a spoon. But they don't come for you, because you don't exist anymore. Not as Giovanni della Cava, not as the Blade, not even as the distraction. Someone else, maybe several, have claimed responsibility. Political rivals, foreign guilds, heretics. Take your pick. The woman in red was never seen again, at least not in Siena. You head north, not to vanish, to find out who used you and why. Because surviving the job isn't enough anymore. You want to understand it. You want to find the real edge of the knife. Your contacts are quiet, distant. No one wants to talk. Until you reach Lucca. There, in a wine shop built into the old Roman wall, you meet a man with no fingers on his left hand. He pours clumsy but drinks neatly. You mention the feast of St. Michael. He nods slowly. Too clean, he says. That kill had 3 hands in it. You ask who the third was. He pours again. Not who. What? You frown. He leans forward. A warning. You learn something chilling. Lorenzo wasn't a target. He was a symbol. A papal advisor sent to remind Siena that Rome never forgets. His presence was meant to tighten strings, to remind the Duke who pulls the bigger purse. Killing him? That wasn't rebellion, it was statement. Not against the Duke, against the Church. But the Church won't retaliate immediately. Not against nobles, not against ghosts. They'll wait. They'll erase names. And when it suits them, they'll burn what's left. You wonder again why you were chosen. You have no family, no real name, no country that claims you. You were perfect for disappearance, so they gave you a stage, just long enough to be noticed, then erased. The guild isn't just about knives. It's about narrative, and your role was to be forgotten. But you don't let them forget. You travel not widely, just enough, telling the story in pieces, in wine stalls and scribe halls, to servants and stonemasons, always without names, always with the same final line. The blade you saw wasn't the one that killed. It catches on not fast, not loudly, but like a hum under floorboards. A few believe it, a few pass it on, and in time, the name Giovanni della Cava becomes a riddle. Was he real? Was he the killer, or the one who stopped it? No one knows, and that's the point. Years later, you return to Siena, disguised, of course. The palace looks the same, but there are new faces now. A new steward, a different duke. They say the last one retired early and entered a monastery near Volterra. You smile, because you know what that means. He understood too. You leave behind no grave, No title, just rumors, and a single scrap of parchment, nailed quietly to a back wall in the palace stables. On it, a phrase in crude Latin, "Not every." Dagger draws blood. Some just turn the head. Lübeck, 1481, cold wet, smelling of brine, beer, and bureaucracy. This was not a city of kings or popes. This was a city of merchants, men who traded in grain, timber, and reputation. Here, paperwork mattered more than swords. A name scrawled on a shipping manifest held more weight than a confession. And it's here, of all places, that you were told to kill someone, not in a back alley, not in a brothel, but in an office. Your target was a man named Ulrich Teichmann, customs clerk, shipping assessor, and, as your letter described him, a man who writes the wrong numbers on the wrong crates for the wrong people. Your handler didn't explain more than that. He just gave you a name, a place, and an oddly thick envelope. Inside were instructions and permits, 4 of them, stamped, sealed, and signed. One for lodging, one for gate access, one for work observation, and one for controlled civil disturbance within Mercantile District. You reread that one 3 times. It was the first time you'd been assigned a kill with government approval. You arrive on a Monday. Rain taps at your coat like an impatient creditor. The clerk at the city gate asks for your 3rd permit. Not your name, not your purpose, your paperwork. You hand it over. He barely glances at you before stamping your access with a bronze die. "Welcome to Lübeck," he says. "Try not to start a war." The man you're meant to kill works in a counting house on Hinter der Berg. It's a long, thin building with a crooked chimney and fogged glass. Inside, it smells of ink and mildew. Dozens of clerks sit in rows, hunched over ledgers. You watch them for hours, posing as a surveyor sent to inspect paper quality. No one questions you. Lübeck loves official titles. You spot Ulrich quickly. 40, pale, jaw like a chisel. Wears gloves even while writing. You watch the way he shifts papers, how he adds things to margins others don't notice. He's not incompetent. He's careful. Too careful. That's what makes him dangerous and hard to reach. You try to follow him. Home, you get stopped, not by guards, by a municipal filing clerk. She asks why you're walking through an unregistered access zone. You show your first 2 permits. She sighs. You need stamp B for residential shadows after 4th bell. You return to your room. You request the stamp. You wait 4 days. By then, Ulrich has changed routines. He's begun taking a different route. He walks with a companion now, a Port Authority liaison with a limp. You trail him again, this time using rooftops. He stops unexpectedly and speaks to the air behind him. "I don't know who you are, but your paperwork's out of date." You freeze. He doesn't turn around, just keeps walking. You consider making it look like a robbery, but that would trigger a customs investigation. The Hanseatic League does not tolerate financial disruptions, even fake ones. You change tactics. You request an observation post inside the counting house. This requires stamp D7 and a notarized statement from a merchant sponsor. You forge one. It passes. Now you're inside, sitting 2 rows behind Ulrich, pretending to verify ink acidity for Guild Clarity compliance. You begin watching him again, but something feels wrong. He isn't just a target, he's testing you, leaving gaps in his routine, turning too suddenly, watching the reflection of your ink jar to see if you blink. He knows. And now, he's waiting. Then, the letter comes, not delivered to your inn, delivered to your desk in the counting house, no seal, just your assumed name, written in immaculate hand. Inside, 1 line. Make the attempt. Let's see whose form is filed first. You burn the letter, but not before memorizing the handwriting. You've seen it before. Your handler, which means this is a test, or worse, a competition. You begin to doubt everything. Is Ulrich actually corrupt, or is he a decoy, a placeholder meant to stall you? A means of keeping you tangled in red tape while something bigger moves in the background? Or are you the disruption? A kill designed to create just enough administrative chaos for someone else's plan to slip through unnoticed. You stare at your dagger that night, still clean, still unused, and you wonder, in a city built on stamps and scrolls, does a blade still mean anything at all? You try to sleep. You fail. There's a scratch in your mind now, a gnawing idea that you're not the only one with instructions, that somewhere in the hierarchy of handlers, agents, and sponsors, you've been misfiled, not as an assassin, but as a decoy, a distraction in fine boots. You sit up in your rented room and reread every note, every permit, every seal you've been given. Nothing jumps out. Nothing explains why the target seems so aware, or why the bureaucracy keeps shifting beneath your feet like loose cobblestone. Then, as the sun rises through soot-colored glass, it hits you. You've been obeying every instruction, filling out every form, getting every stamp like a good citizen, like a good fool. And that's how they've been tracking you. That morning, you don't go to work. You go to the office where all permits originate. The Office of Civil Movements, a narrow building that smells like boiled leather and stale flour. You walk in, ask for the filing logs related to Guild External Surveyor Movement, and pay for expedited access with coin that should have gone toward escape. The clerk hands you a scroll. It contains a record of your every request, each form, each vote, each location you were approved to enter. At the bottom, in red ink, monitored, Class 3 interference authorized. You are the interference, and you didn't even see it coming. You walk to the water's edge. The port hums with barrels, gulls, and men who look away too quickly. You stand near a stack of crates and think about simply vanishing. No violence, no report. Just walk onto a northbound vessel and become a ghost with clean hands. But then you see him, Ulrich, standing at the pier, speaking quietly to the same liaison with the limp. He holds no papers, no seal, and yet the portmaster lets him pass into the loading zone without a glance. You were told he was a clerk, but clerks don't carry gold-ringed ledgers sealed with civic, judiciary twine. That's reserved for internal affairs investigators, which means he's not the target, he's watching the target. And now, he's watching you. You fake an accident, you let a crate roll from a cart and injure your ankle near the port tavern. A sympathetic merchant offers you shelter and a drink. You accept both, just long enough to write a note. Ulrich is not corrupt. He's an auditor. Who else was approved for a kill in Lübeck this month? You pass the note to a courier boy with 2 silver pieces and a lie. For my brother, at the guild hall. Then you wait. 2 days pass. Then a return scroll, no wax, no name. Just a reply in your handler's precise scrawling hand. You are one of 3 approvals. The others were rejected. Yours was the only one that came with documentation. You are not the weapon. You are the paperwork. You stare at it for a long time. Then you understand. They used you to justify the chaos. Your permits were real, your kill order valid. But it was never about the kill. It was about the authorization. Your request created a paper trail, enough for smugglers, enemies, or foreign agents to exploit the gaps your process carved through Lübeck's legal net. You were the key that opened a door someone else walked through. Ulrich was never the real target. The real target is whoever used your paperwork to move something. Through the port while everyone watched you watching him, and you let it happen because you were too focused on the blade, not the ledger. That night, you follow Ulrich. You make no effort to hide. You want him to see you. He does. He pauses at the steps to a warehouse and sighs like a man too tired to be afraid. I thought you'd try again, he says. You shake your head. I didn't try the first time, he chuckles. You weren't meant to. You ask him who the real target was. He studies you for a moment, then says, I think you already know, but it's written nowhere. You offer to help him now. He almost laughs. No. You're done? Go back to your handler, tell him the Widowmaker failed. Then he walks away, leaves you standing in the dark, and just before he disappears, he calls back, don't worry, you'll be useful again, but next time, try not to read so much. The next morning, a final letter arrives. Green wax. No symbol, just a folded page with one line. Job closed. Do not return to Lübeck. Nothing more, no apology, no threat, just closure, stamped and filed, like everything else. You leave the city in the rain, you don't look back. Because you know this already. In a world where documents kill more quietly than blades, you were never the Widowmaker. You were just the ink, and somewhere someone is still using your name. You head east, not far, just far enough to forget the stink of damp parchment and sour ale. You pass through Rostock, then Stralsund, eventually settling in a fishing town so small it doesn't appear on most maps. There's no guild hall, no permits, no seal stamps. Just salt in the wind and old men who smell like rope. It's quiet. Too quiet, maybe. But after Lübeck, even your heartbeat feels loud. You rent a room above a cooper's shop. You help mend barrels for coin. Your hands blister, but the pain feels honest. No blades, no ink. No one knows your name. That should be peace, but it isn't. Because peace doesn't itch like this. Peace doesn't feel like a report left unfinished. You write a letter, not to your handler, to yourself. A record, an admission. You detail everything. The false permits, the target that wasn't, the paperwork that pointed away from blood but led directly to betrayal. Then you sign it, not with your alias, with your real name, or the closest thing to it. You seal it in wax and hide it beneath a floorboard, not for anyone else to find. Just so. You remember this happened, because memory fades. And in your trade, it's too easy to forget which kills were real and which ones were just written into margins. Weeks pass. You don't hear from the guild. That's unusual. Usually there's at least a test, some quiet inquiry to make sure you haven't gone soft. But this time, nothing. No couriers, no requests. You begin to think you've been discarded. Until one night you return home to find your floorboard lifted. Not broken. Lifted. Cleanly. Your sealed letter? Gone. In its place, a scroll. Black wax. But the wax isn't stamped. It's pressed with a fingerprint. You unroll it with shaking hands. Inside, now you're ready. The next message arrives a week later. No address, no target, just a package. Inside, a scroll written in your own hand, the one you hid, and yet, not exactly. Some of the sentences have been altered. Subtly, words replaced, motives inverted. Your failure. In Lübeck now reads as loyal misdirection. Ulrich, the false target, is now listed as a successful neutralization. The forged permits, described as proof of initiative. And at the end, a note in another hand. Sometimes the truth isn't useful, but your lies are beautiful. You stare at the scroll for a long time. Then you laugh. Not because it's funny, because it's over. Not the job, the story. They've rewritten it, filed it, signed it, and now it's real. Which means the truth, that you never killed your target, never uncovered the real scheme, never drew your blade, is irrelevant because someone stamped it, and now the guild believes you did. You are, officially, the Widowmaker of Lübeck. You are promoted, not in title, in utility. Your name now appears in whispered conversations across the Hanseatic trade routes. You are the one who solved Lübeck's corruption problem, the assassin who used ink instead of a blade. The man who turned paperwork into a weapon. The others don't know the truth, but the guild does, and they don't care. Because a lie repeated with authority becomes a tool. You go back to work, not happily, but with understanding. You no longer question the target. You no longer ask what the job means. You just ask where the ledger is because you finally see it. The guild doesn't need killers. It needs authors, storytellers, men who can kill with a paragraph and bury nations under a seal. And you're fluent now. Years later, you receive one last letter sealed with the same fingerprint, no wax, no name, just a single phrase. You've been overwritten. That's how it ends. No blood, no scream, just a quiet correction. They'll send someone else now. A cleaner, a younger version of you. He'll find your floorboard, your scroll, your real name, and he'll file it, erase it, replace it. In Lübeck, the records show a man named Ulrich Teichmann died in 1481, sudden illness. Filed under internal restructuring. No mention of you, just a list of stamps and a beautiful lie. You never saw his face. You remember that more than anything. The first man you killed with a crossbow was just a blur of fabric, light, and distance. A shape, not a person. His back was turned, his head bowed. Maybe he was praying, maybe he was just adjusting his boot. But when your finger moved, just slightly, just enough, his body collapsed before the sound reached the crowd. No scream. No final words, just a fall, and you never saw his face. That was supposed to be the mercy of killing from afar, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of a life where your own memory became your punishment. Because when you kill from across a courtyard, or a bell tower, or the edge of a festival tent, you're not haunted by blood, you're haunted by uncertainty. You were trained outside Milan, a camp nestled in the foothills of a forest, no map marked clearly. You weren't a soldier. You weren't even meant to be a killer. You were a Fletcher's apprentice, good with your hands, even better with your eyes, and when the recruiter saw you split a knot in the fence post with a practice bolt, he said, "You'll never have to look them in the eye." You believed him. That was your first mistake. Crossbows were the future. That's what everyone said. Simple, brutal, precise. No years of training like a longbow, no duels, no mess, just a mechanism. A clean line from bolt to target. Push, pull, silence. You were taught to strip and string yours in less than a minute. You were taught how to lace poison into the iron. You were taught how to shoot, not to kill, but to cripple. To maim, to shame, to send messages. And most importantly, you were taught how to disappear. No uniform, no banner, no record. Just one shot, then smoke, then quiet. Your first real job came in Cremona, a visiting dignitary from Mantua, accused of spying, or adultery, or both. No one told you. You were simply handed a sketch of the man's hat and a time of day. When the bells toll for terce, you climbed a scaffold under renovation, laid flat against warm tile, waited. You heard the bells, you saw the hat, you aimed. The bolt hit square between the shoulder blades. He fell forward. Crowd screamed. You vanished. Perfect. And yet, you never saw his face. That became the pattern. City after city, kill after kill. You became a name no one spoke aloud. You were the confession arrow, the crossbow that never missed, the one who made death feel like a judgment from God. Some started, calling it divine justice. Others called it cowardice. You didn't care because your kills were clean. You didn't hear them beg. You didn't feel their blood. You just watched them drop and disappeared into the day. But then came the job in Ghent, and everything broke. It wasn't supposed to be difficult. A merchant, rich, loud, a supplier of weapons and betrayal. Your handler called him expendable. You called him Target 11. You found a rooftop above the spice market. Perfect view of the wine hall entrance. You counted the steps. You watched the shadows. You lined the bolt. And then, just before release, he turned. He looked up, right at you. Eyes locked. And for the first time in your career, you saw a target's face. You fired anyway, but too late. The shot went low, hit him in the gut. Not fatal. Not fast. He screamed, people ran, but he pointed at you. Guards rushed the scaffolds. You dropped your bow and ran, cut through chimneys, shoved past pigeons and laundry lines. You made it out, but barely. And for the first time, you didn't disappear cleanly. Now you were being hunted, not by clients, not by rivals, by the guilt. You started dreaming about that moment, his eyes wide and full of questions, not fear, not hate, just confusion, as if asking, why me? Why like this? Why? You tried to explain it to your handler. He didn't listen, he just said, next time shoot faster. But something had changed. You began to hesitate. Fractional, subtle, but enough. In Bruges, you let the target walk 3 paces further than you should have. In Antwerp, you adjusted your sight 3 times. In Lyon, you didn't fire at all, you told. The guild the man never showed, but he had. You just couldn't do it. Not without seeing his eyes first. You were sent a warning, not a letter, not a threat. Just your crossbow, broken in half, laid across your bedroll with 1 bolt, undamaged. Message, clear, you miss again, and you don't come back. You carried the broken stock with you anyway. A reminder, not of failure, of distance, of how far you had to stand from your own humanity to keep going. You receive 1 more job, 1 last attempt, and this time, the letter is different, not typed, not encoded, handwritten, and at the bottom, instead of a name, a phrase. You may choose whether to aim. No pressure, no threat, just choice. And you wonder, do they already know you won't? Are they offering you a clean exit, or are they testing how far you've already fallen? You don't pack quickly. You sit with the letter for hours, watching the wax flicker in the lamplight, not because it says anything new, but because it doesn't. It's quiet, too quiet, no coded timing, no second seal, no backup instructions in case of failure, just a name, a city, and that final phrase like it was scribbled in passing. You may choose whether to aim. You leave before dawn, not because you want to, because if you wait longer, you'll talk yourself out of it. And you need to know 1 last time what kind of man you've become. The city is Metz, a border town between everything and nothing. You arrive on market day. That helps. Crowds mean cover. Noise means excuses. You rent a room above a tannery. The smell is unbearable, but no one checks who you are when your boots already stink like boiled leather. You scout the square, then the bell tower, then the cafe roof with the cracked tile. You find the angle, just like before, just like always, and then you see her. You weren't told it would be her, middle-aged, dark cloak, hair in braids. She walks slowly, deliberately, not noble, but not poor either. She stops to speak to a boy selling almonds, smiles, buys 2. She hands 1 to a beggar without hesitation, then keeps walking. You freeze. You weren't expecting this. Your instructions didn't say what she'd done. No mention of politics, no warnings, just her name. And your choice. You check the bolt. Straight. Balanced. Perfect shot. But suddenly everything feels crooked. You follow her. Carefully. You trail her through the marketplace. Past the churchyard. Through a narrow alley where butcher shops hang their offerings in rows like prayers. She stops at a wooden door. knocks twice, waits. An old woman opens it. They embrace. You step back into the shadow of a cart. You don't need to see inside. You've seen enough. She's not a threat. She's someone's daughter. Maybe someone's sister, maybe a mother. You grip your crossbow tighter, not because you're going to use it, but because you want to know what it feels like not. So that night you don't sleep, you just think about the first kill, about the man who looked up too late, about all the faces you never saw, and this one that you can't unsee. You realize something that chills you deeper than any order ever has. It was never about how far you stood, it was about how little you were supposed to know. The guild didn't train you to aim, they trained you not to ask who you were aiming at. They made your distance a virtue. And now, that distance is killing you. You go back the next morning, no crossbow, no disguise, just a letter. You slide it under her door. It contains no name, no signature, just a message. You were chosen, not because of guilt, but because of attention. You were seen. That alone was enough. Then you walk away. 3 days later, a courier finds you. He gives you a sealed pouch, no words, just hands it off and vanishes. Inside, one item, a bolt. Your bolt, fletching intact, shaft clean, tip unused. You stare at it, then notice something carved into the wood. A phrase you didn't write, one word, withdrawn. You leave Metz that night. No shadows behind you, no handler waiting, no next job lined up. You're not fired, you're not hunted. You're just done, and you understand now. The letter wasn't permission, it was a mirror. It asked, do you still need this distance? You answered without pulling the trigger, and someone, somewhere approved you keep the bolt. Not as a weapon, but as a reminder that you were once given the choice to aim and chose not to. But sometimes, in quieter towns, when you hear the sharp click of a wooden latch, or the creak of an arm being drawn back, or a cry in the dark too clean to be natural, you wonder, was there someone else, standing on another rooftop, with you in their sights, waiting, watching, wondering if you were still worth sparing? You walk the northern roads for a long time, no destination, no orders, just quiet. The kind of quiet that fills the chest and refuses to leave. You no longer carry a crossbow, just a worn cloak, a dagger you haven't drawn in months, and the unspent bolt in your satchel. Its fletching still clean, its message still carved, withdrawn. You've replayed the moment in Metz 100 times, not the face of the woman. That's beginning to blur, but the choice, the stillness of the street, the weight of your hand on the trigger, and the silence that followed. You didn't become a hero. You didn't save her from anything but you, and that's not nobility, it's just subtraction. One less name in a ledger, one less scream behind someone's door. You find work near a port, carrying fish, scrubbing boats. No one asks where you came from, they just nod when you lift the heavy crates without complaint. At night, you watch the water and think of rooftops. The angles, the calculations, the speed of the wind, the rise of the rib cage, the way someone's cloak lifts just before they fall. And then you imagine something harder, looking someone in the eye, and choosing to say nothing at all. A stranger arrives at the tavern one night, grey cloak, no bags, no hunger. She sits at your table without asking. You look up and feel something lock in place. Not fear, not memory, recognition. She sets down a small box, wooden, black-latched, smooth, doesn't speak, just waits. You open it. Inside, a crossbow, yours, but not the old one. This one is new, clean, oiled, perfect. You look up. She finally speaks. There you are. Want you back. You laugh. Dry. tired. You tell her no. I don't aim anymore. She nods, as if she expected it, then slides a folded letter across the table. Not to kill. So you go, not to disappear, not to fight, but to explain. You walk from village to village. You find the ones with hands too quiet and hearts too fast. You hand them bolts and ask, "What do you think this is for?" They say war. They say justice. They say gold. You shake your head. You say, "It's for deciding who you'll remember." That's all it ever was. Not a weapon, not a message, just a weight. And now you pass that weight on, gently, slowly, without pushing the string. Years pass. You train quietly. No one knows your name, no one says thank you, but the rooftops are a little less full now, the target's a little less arbitrary. You still dream, sometimes, of the man in Ghent, of the woman in Metz, of the ones you never saw. But now you dream of something else too. A field unbroken, with targets never drawn, and the soft click of a crossbow being lowered, not fired, lowered, because mercy, like precision, must be practiced. One day, a young trainee asks you, "Master, what if I miss?" You smile. You say, "Then you might finally see." It was always damp down there, even in summer, even when Paris above was choking on powdered wigs and sunlight, the tunnels below stayed wet. Not flooded, not dry, just always on the edge of something. A slow, creeping damp that seeped into cloth and finger bones alike. You never got used to it. You just learned how to move with it carefully, quietly. Like the stones were listening, and maybe they were, because the Paris sewers held more than runoff and waste. They held secrets. And for 10 years, they held you. You weren't born underground. You arrived there because there was nowhere else. The surface didn't want you. You were an errand boy once, ran parchment between scribes and clerics. Until one morning, a man in a plum-colored coat gave you a satchel to deliver and 3 silver coins. The satchel exploded 4 minutes after you handed it over. You were blamed, not publicly, privately, by the ones who count favors in knives, not numbers. They didn't kill you. They did something worse. They named you, loudly, in a hall you weren't allowed to enter. Say a false name, tied to a list. And from that moment on, you weren't a boy anymore. You were a warning, so you ran. First into alleys, then into crypts, then finally into the sewer mouths that yawned like cathedrals. You kept running until you couldn't hear the bells. Until the only sound left was the slow drip of a city pretending not to rot. And in that stillness, you waited. The first few days were about survival. Rats, water, mold. You moved through the tunnels like someone fleeing God. But then, something shifted. You stopped running. You began watching, listening, counting, and that's when you noticed them. Others, they didn't speak. Not to you, not at first, but they passed food down, coins, maps, little things. There was a world beneath the world, and slowly you became part of it. You made rules. Never walk in daylight, never follow a clean boot print, it's bait, and never ever trust anyone who hums while walking. The humming ones didn't stay long. No one ever explained why, but you heard the splashes stop, and no one returned to collect their things. A year passed, then another, then 5. You became known, not by name, but by location. If someone needed something, an item lost, a message carried, a person found, they left a token at the old grate behind Rue Saint-Honoré. A cork with red wax meant delivery. A tooth meant tracking. A stone wrapped in cloth, that meant someone needed to disappear. You didn't ask questions, you just waited, took the item, completed the task, returned to the dark. No one saw your face. but everyone knew you were watching. They started calling you le fantôme des égouts, the ghost of the sewers. Not because you were a killer, but because you never surfaced. Not once. You were committed. But it wasn't loyalty. It was logic. Every time you considered leaving the tunnels, you remembered the plum-coated man. And how long his memory might stretch. Long enough to ruin your second life the way he'd ruined the first. Then one day a boy showed up. 10, maybe 11, thin, wide-eyed, coughing too much. He held a folded paper in his hand, offered it to you. Didn't say a word. You unfolded it, no message, just a crude map. Not of the city above, of your tunnels, with one section marked in red ink, one word written there. Wait. You nodded, took the paper, and for the first time in years, you asked a question. Who sent you? The boy just shook his head and walked away. You waited 3 days, nothing. Then a boot step in the marked tunnel. Careful, heavy, not rushed. You stayed in shadow. Watched the figure pass, a woman, well-fed, military stance, clean hair. She carried no weapon, just a satchel. You let her go, then checked the tunnel after she vanished. No trace, no scent, just a single coin on the stone ledge. Gold, stamped with no nation. Then came the second visitor, a week later, man this time, short, limping, coughing worse than the boy. Dropped something, a lock of hair tied with string, left it in the same place, didn't look back. You began to understand you weren't hiding anymore. You were the hand beneath the floorboards, the one people used when laws broke. When shadows were safer than signatures, and then came the list not in a note, etched into stone. Tiny names, right at eye level, freshly carved. You recognized 2, men you knew from years ago, both dead now. The third name? Yours, not the false one. Not the warning name, your real one hidden deep, carved carefully, almost reverently. Someone knew, and someone had left this for you to see. You stared at it for hours, not out of fear, out of confusion, because no one else should have known that name. No one left alive, unless you weren't the only one who ran, unless this whole system down here wasn't born from your survival, but from someone else's. And you wonder, what if you're not alone? What if someone's been waiting even longer than you? You don't touch the carved name. You don't wipe the stone or try to erase it. You just stare because it doesn't belong there. Not just for what it is, your real name, hidden and spelled right, but for where it is. Quiet, clean, fresh. There are no tools down here that make such cuts. Not the kind you've seen. This was done with patience, with purpose. Someone wanted you to see it, and more than that, someone wanted you to know they knew. You listen for footsteps. None. You whisper your name aloud for the first time in years. It echoes, not with menace, but with recognition, and something stirs in your chest that hasn't moved in a long, long time. A memory. You were 7, a market, crowded, your father's hand around yours, a woman arguing over turnips, a soldier coughing something wet into the collar of his coat. Someone jostled your shoulder. You dropped your bread. The loaf landed in the dirt, and then, just faintly, you saw it. A carved mark on a nearby post, an X inside a triangle, etched shallow. Your father grabbed your arm too hard, pulled you away, said only one word, ignore. But you never did. And now, years later, in the tunnels beneath a different life, you've seen that same mark again, carved into the stone wall beside your real name. It's not a signature. It's a doorbell. You don't move for hours. You wait. You eat a cold half of a carrot. You drink from the condensation pooled in a ceiling crack. You sleep in 30-second intervals, head propped against the wall, knife on your lap. And then, finally, just before dawn, you hear it. Tap. Tap, tap, scratch. 3 slow knocks followed by the scrape of something flat along the tunnel floor. You don't move. Not yet. You wait 5 more minutes, then rise. You follow the sound, not loudly. You don't call out. You listen, and it leads you down a corridor you've never entered. Narrow, choked with moss. Pipes above sag like tired ribs. At the end is a door not stone. Wood, with a handle. No one builds doors in sewers, not unless they're keeping something in or keeping everything else out. You knock 3 times, then once more. You wait. The door creaks open an inch, then another. No face, just a hand. Holding a folded square of cloth, you take it. The door shuts. You return to your own tunnel before opening it. Inside is not a message, not exactly, just an object, a strip of wax paper. Marked with lines, a map of the tunnels. But not the ones you know. These are older, deeper, running below the sewers, beneath the bones, the catacombs, and at the very bottom right corner, circled in soot, a single word. Still. You wait another week. No contact, no second message, just silence. So you decide. You gather your satchel, a coil of rope, a small lantern. You descend, not into the sewers, but below them. The catacombs are colder. The air stiffens your lungs. The bones begin as decoration, rows of skulls, femurs stacked like firewood, but quickly become cluttered. Piles, tumbles, forgotten arrangements of the forgotten. You follow the map, step by step, marker by marker. And finally, after 3 hours, you reach it, an alcove, empty, clean. And in the center, a chair, wooden, plain, facing the wall. On that wall, more names. Hundreds. Carved or lived, and now you do too. The man stands, he's tall, lean. His eyes don't blink, he says one last thing. If you don't add names to the wall, they fade. Then he's gone, not in a blink. Just gone, like no breath ever warmed the air. Where he stood, you return to your tunnel, sit in the dark, and begin carving. Not your own name, but another. Someone you remember from the surface. Someone who once saved you with a lie. Someone no one else remembers anymore. It takes an hour, then you carve another and another. Not because you were told to, because you finally understand. The sewer isn't a hiding place, it's a library. And you're the last page that hasn't curled. It becomes a routine. Wake, eat a little, walk the tunnels, take nothing, speak to no one, and then descend again into the catacombs, to the wall, to the names, and you carve. Each day one more, sometimes 2. Only names you remember. People who didn't deserve the silence that swallowed them. A messenger who ran faster than the fire. A woman who smuggled maps inside bread crusts. A boy who lit lanterns for the ones who came home too late. You write them not in glory, not in grief, but in defiance, because the surface forgets, but the stone remembers. The world above. Shifts, you hear rumors from the grates of kings falling. New parliaments. More bodies in the river than ever, but you no longer follow the news. You follow the scratches. There are others now. Someone else is carving. You see different hands in the lines. Softer, faster, more desperate. Sometimes you find petals left under. Certain names, coins, buttons. One time a tooth. You never see the others, not clearly, but you hear them. Soft footsteps, never closer than 20 yards. Breathing in the rhythm of fear. You never speak, because the catacombs aren't for speaking. They're for remembering what the surface tries to bury. Then one morning you find your name, crossed out a clean line, thin, precise. Someone carved a new word next to it, just one. Surface. It's not a warning, it's an instruction. And you know what it means. Someone wants you to go back. You take the back stairs, not the main path, the spiral staircase you never used before. Half collapsed, crawling with roots. So narrow you lose your breath by the time you reach the top. You emerge behind a cemetery. Morning, pale sky, cold. You walk 4 blocks, then 10. The buildings have changed. The doors are newer, everything feels painted over, but the bones beneath haven't moved. They never do. You find a note under a stone bench, folded tight, sealed with grease and thread. You open it. Inside. You've kept the names, now speak them. That's all, no signature. But there's a map of a cafe. You follow it, it's still there. Same wood, same cracked glass, but the staff has changed. The people don't look up when you enter, they look down, you sit, you wait. And a woman, hooded, tall, smelling faintly of wax, brings you a book, sets it in front of you, then leaves. No word. You open. It's not blank, but it's not legible. Dozens, hundreds of names, but none carved, all written in ink so faint you need to squint to see. You recognize 3. You run your finger down the 4th and feel a tremble. It's your handwriting, and it's dated today. You understand now. The catacombs are not a grave, they're a ledger. But the cafe, that's the index. A place where the erased are cross-referenced, archived, made real again, but only if spoken. So you do. You speak the names, quietly, one by one. The waiter brings you tea. You keep reading. You speak until your throat is raw, and by the time you reach the end of the list, you realize the cafe is empty. You are alone, not abandoned, just trusted. To remember, you return underground. Back to the wall. You carve 3 new names, then stop. You take the dagger, turn it over, and, for the first time in years, you carve your name twice, once at the top and once at the bottom, because this isn't your hiding place anymore, it's your record, your way of saying, I was here, I waited, I remembered, and maybe someday someone else will come, someone running, someone ruined, someone erased. They'll see your name twice, and they'll know. This is not where the forgotten are buried. This is where they are kept. It was never supposed to be remembered, not by the guild, not by the city, not by you. That was the condition, the agreement, the signature, one life. One night, one extinguished candle, and then silence. But Prague doesn't forget things so easily. Its streets are too twisted, too old, too hungry. Secrets slip down the gutters and into the stones. And if you listen, really listen, you can still hear the echo of that contract, sealed with red wax, written by shaking hands and executed by someone who never quite left, someone like you. The contract came without a name, only a location, Mala Strana, the lesser town, a room above, a vintner's cellar, no windows, no door from the street, just a hatch through the ceiling, and a staircase that creaked like it remembered everything. You weren't given a description, just a date, a time, and a condition. When the second candle goes out, you enter, not before. It was strange. You'd carried out killings in ballrooms, back streets, cathedrals, but never by appointment, never with so much ceremony. It felt old, older than the guild, older than the city, but the pay was high, too high, and so you didn't ask. You followed, like always. You arrived early, cloak clean, blade clean, mind not so clean. You waited 3 blocks away, watching the dark house. No movement, no lights, except for one tiny flicker, barely visible through the roof vent. The first candle. You watched it burn. For 23 minutes, it danced, then it choked and died. A second flame lit in its place. This was the signal. The room was being prepared. Someone inside was waiting. You approached silently. Roof tiles held your weight. The hatch was unlocked, as promised. You opened it, with gloved fingers, lowered yourself into the black. The smell hit first. Cloves, sweat, old parchment, then sound, barely, breathing. Measured, not panicked. You lit no lantern. Your orders were clear. No fire, no voice, no witness, no trace. You moved along the beams, down the ladder, into the stillness, and then you saw them. A man kneeling, not bound, voluntary. He looked up, did not flinch. He didn't speak. He just raised a piece of parchment, unrolled it, held it toward you. You took it. No title, no greeting, just a contract. One name, one reason, one instruction. Kill me when this candle dies. I have signed. You looked at the bottom. One signature, shaky, wet with fresh ink. Yours was not needed, nor requested. This was a self-authored execution. You looked at the candle, still burning, waning. You waited. 2 minutes, maybe 3. The man stayed kneeling, eyes open, then closed, then open again. Never begging, never blinking, just waiting. And when the candle finally hissed, you obeyed. Quick, clean, a gesture more than a struggle. He slumped forward, exhaling softly, as though finishing a sentence. And that should have been it. A life ended by permission, a contract fulfilled, a memory discarded. But something bothered you, not the silence, not the ease, the paper, the contract. It was missing a second. Signature, his and yours. Only one name signed the page, and it wasn't his, it wasn't yours, it was a third. A name you'd never seen. A name that doesn't exist. Gregor Nejad. You took the parchment anyway, folded it, sealed it in oilcloth. Left. No trace except you forgot the wax, the second candle's wax. It had dripped onto the floor, and in that wax, clear as bone, was another fingerprint. Not the man's, not yours. You left Prague that night, but Prague did not leave you. 3 weeks later, in Krakow you passed a vendor selling city maps, and one was older, odd. A street labeled in ink that didn't match. A street you never walked, but matched the house. Labeled Gregor's Gate. You asked the vendor who named it. He blinked, said, the street didn't exist anymore, said it burned, said it never had a gate, and you wonder, was the candle ever meant to go out? Or were you supposed to walk away before it did? You keep the parchment tucked deep in oilcloth, never folded the same way twice. It's not superstition, it's habit. You check it once a month, not for fading, for changes, because you swear, each time you unfold it, the ink has shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, but subtly. A curl on the G that wasn't there before. A longer downstroke on the N, tiny, quiet alterations, like someone else is still writing. And you know, deep down, that paper doesn't behave that way. Not unless someone signed it. After, you start looking into the name Gregor Nejad. It means nothing, not to you, not to the guild. You ask carefully, quietly. 2 coins here, a bottle there. No direct questions, but the replies are always the same. That name doesn't belong to anyone. And then the same response every time. Why do you ask? You lie, of course, say it's a bad memory, a half-remembered patron, but the eyes linger too long when you say it. And more than once, someone whispers back, I think I've seen it too. On a wall, in a ledger, carved into the base of a church bell. never in the same place, never for long. You return to Prague, not through the gates, through the crypts. You dress as a novice monk. Walk with the pilgrims. Keep your blade hidden. You reach Malastrana,